Hi there, thanks for joining us on this video where we're talking about race and culture in Vancouver, and specifically in this episode, my experience about being a Black woman in Vancouver, Washington, in Southwest Washington, the greater Portland metro region, and I guess in general the Pacific Northwest. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So if that's something that interests you, stay tuned. Love talking to people from all over the country who are considering moving to Vancouver and Southwest Washington. So if you know anyone who's thinking about relocating, make sure to share this video with them. If you have any questions, you can text me right now at 360-818-4438. I'd be happy to have a casual text conversation with you. We can hop on Zoom if you want a video chat, and we can discuss your different options, what you're looking for, the job opportunities here, the activities, if it's something that's going to make sense for you, because maybe Vancouver's for you and maybe it's not, and either way is totally okay. So I'd love to talk to you. Reach out to me however you choose. Text, email, phone call, DM me on social media. It's all good.
Snail mail?
Snail mail? Then I have to give out my address, so.
Fair enough.
There's too many creepy people online, you know?
That's true.
Do you want to kind of talk about how this video idea came about?
Right, so my name is Jared. I'm the other half, better half of Hal Byrd.
Did you say the better half?
Yeah, guys can be the better half sometimes. It's 2021 now. Anywho, I'm Hal's husband, and I love to have fun. We love to have fun together. So you'll see a lot of that in this video. The idea for the video honestly just came up because as we're trying to give a lot of different resources for people considering moving, reality is based on the color of your skin, you know, race, culture, the climate, that is important. That was important to us when we were considering moving. So, and
it can play a decision in where you want to move to or where you feel comfortable, especially if you've never relocated before and you have a lot of family support in the area, regardless of your race. It can be very scary moving to a place that you may or may not have any family, friends, support system, which we didn't when we came here.
Funny, I'm thinking about when I first told my mom, and I think you might have said this in one of the videos, but when I first told my mom, Hallie and I were thinking about moving up, you know, at the time we were in Southern California. So we said, hey, we're thinking about moving up to the Northwest into Washington State. And my mom almost fell off her chair laughing. God bless your mom. She said, are there even any Black people in Washington or Oregon? And that's a common question, you know, that we had, and obviously my mom had. And so again, it's a fair question. It's something to think about, whether you're, you know, Black, a person of color, or you're just someone who's concerned about just the general area that you're moving into. So,
and one of the people who's watching every video, and I appreciate their support, is Sid. Specifically said that the reason I started watching your videos is because you're the only person of color that's talking about living in Vancouver. So we thought this was a great video. So shout out to you, Sid. This video is partially for you.
And this is honestly a question that you seem to get a lot for people who are considering moving. You know, the Pacific Northwest is starting to become a very attractive area for people for a lot of different reasons. And again, based on your conceptions, your experience, your perspective, your ethnicity, it's a big question that you seem to get a lot. And I know I have a lot of people ask me, you know, what I found is that the Northwest, this beautiful little gem, is probably the least known and understood and familiar out of every part of the country. It's kind of really is like kind of a final frontier. So this kind of goes right in line with sharing resources that we kind of were looking for when we were thinking about making a move a few years back. Scratch.
All right.
You know, it's a pet peeve of mine when people say, itch my face. Like, how do you itch yours? Anything. Don't cut that out. All right, let's do this.
Okay.
So, your turn. Do I lead or do you lead?
I thought you were interviewing me. Or
I thought we were just reading questions. Like,
okay,
so kind of like
we'll
I said,
both
like,
give our perspective.
Right, because what I, you know, these are like questions that we get. So, you know, the questions that we have here are probably the most common. So you can see
we're doing this on the fly.
We're doing this on the fly. But these are kind of common questions that I feel like we were wondering way back when. And these are common questions that we get now.
Okay. Today, did you want to mention, is
February
23rd, 2021.
Right.
which is the 1-year anniversary of Ahmaud Arbery being killed in Georgia while running. So this morning we ran 2.23 miles to commemorate and honor his memory. And it
was a very somber run. Yeah. And again, this goes back to, why is this important? So again, as being Black people, unfortunately, we can't take for granted a lot of things that you may be able to take for granted if you're white. It's just a reality of it. And it shouldn't come as a newsflash to anybody in 2021.
Especially after 2020.
So, when you hear stories about Black men, getting killed while running or Black women killed in their car, again, these are things that you have to consider, right? I mean, this is safety and health and just some really real topics. And obviously, like anything, like the old commercial disclosure, your results may vary, right? So we're going to give you our perspective based on our lifestyle, kind of what we're into, what we do, and you can kind of take from it what you will. So.
And I would add that this is really coming from a place of love for ourselves, love for our community, love for the people in our community, and for people who might be joining us. Two people's individual experiences are never going to represent the whole. Our experiences are going to be different than someone who grew up here. Jarrett's lived in every corner of the country. I grew up in California, and then I moved up here, so that's our experience is going to be different. I guess we can get into more details, but I just want to let people know that we're really coming from a place of love, a place of giving information, and just I don't want to say information, our personal experiences.
Right. There's no right or wrong, right? So I mean, if we were interviewing whoever's watching this episode, obviously they have their experiences, their journey, and it helps shape everything. So I don't think that disclosure is even necessary. We love this area. I'll put that out there up front. Otherwise, we wouldn't be shooting a video about it. Otherwise,
I wouldn't talk about it every week.
You wouldn't talk about it. Otherwise, you wouldn't
I'd be looking for somewhere else.
Decided to help people move here. So that goes without saying.
To come off to say, whatever background you come from, this isn't meant to offend anyone or to do anything else and share our experience, which is going to be different than yours, no matter what race you are.
And honestly, you'll probably delete this, but if it offends you, you're probably not who you're trying to reach anyway. Because again, we're regular people, right? And we have concerns as Black Americans, and hopefully that should resonate with any American. But I know it won't. But if it offends you, say la vie.
Give your referral to a different realtor.
Say la vie. Let's go.
Okay, so the first question is about background. What was your racial and cultural experience growing up?
You want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
So I am simply, I guess, half Black, half white. On my white side, my family came here from England in 1604 to the Northeast. They were farmers. My mom grew up on a farm, so just generations and generations of white pilgrim farmers.
Were they considered settlers? Like the days?
Yeah, I mean, my family has been in the U.S. before it was a country. For what is that? 1776, for over 150 years before it was a country. So
mine too.
Yeah.
But I'll get into that later.
And on my dad's side, which is my Black side, my family comes from Grenada in the Caribbean, so that's more of a Caribbean American experience versus a traditional Black American experience. Like culturally, on my Black side, is very rooted in the Caribbean. I grew up in the suburbs of California. I grew up in Rancho Cucamonga, which is a real place, not just on the movie Friday.
You sure?
And I'm sure. Even though it was a majority white area, which I think most areas in the country are, it was very diverse. I met people in college, like Black people in college, who had the experience of being the only Black person in their class growing up, and that wasn't my experience growing up. So I didn't really have a more traditional Black American experience, I feel like, until I went to college, and that really opened up my eyes. I was called the N-word for the first time in college.
Really?
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So you grew up in the outskirts of LA.
Mm-hmm.
You went to college in LA.
Yes.
And that's the first time you got called nigger.
Yes.
Wow.
I think I'm gonna have to bleep that out. because of YouTube.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so going back to like misconceptions, I guess, like to me, I would have thought Los Angeles being, even more diverse than where you grew up, I would think anyway, you wouldn't have experienced it. But, there are, can I say assholes on YouTube?
I don't think so.
Oh. Anyway.
So that's kind of my racial and cultural experience growing up in terms of not experiencing a lot of racism, not exposed to it, aware that it existed, but didn't really have any firsthand knowledge of it until...
So like being called the N-word was your first like overt exposure to a racist or racism, would you say?
Yeah, and I think, and I don't know, maybe I'm a little bit aloof and maybe I just wasn't paying attention growing up. But yeah, that was the first time that I experienced it. And what about you, dear?
So me, a little bit different background. I'm originally from the East Coast, pointing like that's East Coast, that way, as to, in respect to how we're sitting now. But from Philadelphia originally, born and raised. I spent my first 30 years in Philadelphia in the Northeast, moved down to Atlanta, Georgia, spent almost 8 years, and then you and I met long distance. At the time you were in LA, living in LA, and we did the long distance thing for a while. Was actually thought I was going to drag her back to Georgia, but other plans emerged, and we ended up staying in Southern California, where we spent the next almost 5 years.
Yeah, 5 years.
And then got the bright idea to look for greener pastures.
Literally greener.
Literally.
We've been looking at it online.
Turn left onto Tomlinson Road, then turn.
What'd you think?
Look at that view right there. Wow. I just think, wow. I think everything happens for a reason. And I'm thinking, wow. My inner country boy is saying, well, golly.
Turn
Well,
left
golly,
to stay
what?
on Delina Lane, then make a U-turn.
Well, golly, what?
This sure is a pretty sight. They have a traction advisory sign. That means it gets some snow. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Should we get something mailed there from Amazonian? Scamanian? Amazonian?
I'm sure they have a mailbox at the store too.
Oh, okay.
Let's drive back.
What are you thinking, Mrs. Byrd?
What am I thinking? I'm thinking that everything that we've experienced in Portland feels like home, Feels like Portland was calling to us and the gorge was calling to us and we didn't even know it. And being here and the people that we've met and friends that we've made in such a short time, just seems like what we've been wanting.
And then we came up to beautiful Southwest Washington. So that's kind of my geographic trail. So yeah, I have the perspective of living in almost all corners of the country anyway. I went to school in West Virginia, and that was for college, yeah. That was totally different from what I'd gotten used to growing up in Philadelphia. So I have that perspective. Background-wise, I am what we call an ADOS, A-D-O-S, an African descendant of slavery. So I'm literally 5 generations removed from slavery. Through my journey, I'm a little bit older than Hal, but through my journey, I also experienced overt and covert racism, if you will. So I know what it looks like. I know what it feels like. I know the tenseness. And I'm no beginner to it. So that was definitely one of my concerns, when we were thinking about leaving SoCal, even though ironically, one of the probably ugliest racial incidents I had, which involved law enforcement, was in Southern California in the small town of Temecula where we used to live. So again, you wouldn't think that, but you know, it is what it is. So that definitely was a consideration of mine, for me and for you, you know, when we were thinking about moving up here.
Yeah, and I think that the Pacific Northwest has a reputation of being very liberal and progressive, and it is to some extent, but I would say that there are aspects of systemic racism in every corner of this country and probably most parts of the world. The Oregon and Washington, the Pacific Northwest, which I only consider Oregon and Washington the Pacific Northwest because they're the only states that actually touch the Pacific.
Right. Even though by definition now, Pacific Northwest now includes, besides Oregon and Washington, Idaho, and is it Montana?
I don't think so.
Okay, but it does now include Idaho.
So I consider that to be the Northwest, and the Pacific Northwest to be Oregon and Washington. But so this perception of it being so liberal, progressive, you know, loosey-goosey, people might think that it's one of the areas in the country that's less affected by racism, and I don't see that to be the case. I think that whether you go to the South or the Northwest, the Midwest, the middle of the country, you're going to find systemic racism, and then you're going to find individuals who are racist.
Yeah, that's been my experience. There's been no area that was any less or more, you know. So whether it be Philadelphia, Atlanta, you know, Southern California.
Would think living in the South would be the worst.
Right, but again, like you said, so in Atlanta, Metro Atlanta, that's one thing, because the population of Black people there is very high comparative to the rest of the country. When you get on the outskirts, and that's kind of where I lived and spent time, was on the outskirts, totally different story.
Right.
So
again,
unfortunately,
here, like on the outskirts, absolutely, you get less diverse. The further you go away from the metro area.
And sadly, you know, and there's some great people who live on the outskirts, right? Like that's one of the things that we're planning on is buying some land and having a property on the outskirts. But unfortunately, because I think people aren't exposed to different cultures, different ethnicities, different way of life, different backgrounds. And again, it goes for here like anywhere else.
Let's jump into question number 2.
Okay.
What were your biggest concerns before moving? My biggest concerns before moving weren't actually race-based. They were primarily being completely transparent, preparedness-based, getting out of California, which has a huge population and no immediate access to water. The water is piped in, so from being able to survive a natural disaster like an earthquake or war, zombie apocalypse, all that kind of stuff, you know, just whatever could possibly happen within our imaginations and beyond our imaginations, we just felt like getting to a place in the country that had a smaller population, that had access to natural resources that you need to survive, made a lot of sense. So having water and less people was the biggest thing. Taxes was a big consideration for us. Going from, you know, very high tax state like California, where the, you know, upper bracket for personal income tax was like 13%.
Can you do a video about this?
Yes.
Check it out.
But maybe people don't watch every video.
Well, I'm telling them check it out.
So I would say from a preparedness standpoint, and taxes were the biggest considerations. I don't think, I'm trying to remember back 3 years ago, but I don't remember race playing a big part in deciding, well, I can live here because I'm Black or mixed, and I wouldn't live here because of that. I mean, we looked all over the place. We considered Tennessee, we considered South Dakota, we considered Eastern Washington, we looked at Nevada for a quick minute, but we wanted to get out of the desert. We prefer something more foresty and lush.
Panama?
We looked at Panama, we looked at moving out of the country, we looked a lot of places before we decided on Washington, and then ultimately on within the state of Washington on Vancouver.
It'd be cool, like if you're obviously you're watching this video, but drop in the comments what other places you're considering now, or maybe considered before you made your last move. But yeah, and I would agree. Biggest concerns weren't race-based or related, because again, at least for me, probably one of the most traumatizing racial experiences I've ever had was in Southern California. So, and then we'll get into kind of our lifestyle, so you can put it in context in a second, but you know, we're kind of like homebodies. We're to ourselves. We do some business.
We're both introverts.
We're introverts. We have a fairly small circle, which I think is starting to grow, but we'll talk about that too. I think there's great people everywhere, you know, but it seems like, I don't know what about the air, the mixture, seems like it's a little bit higher concentration. But just closing out question number 2, the biggest concern for us at the time in our journey was thinking, and I think a lot of people at the time where we're filming this were right on the heels of that big freeze over in Texas, right, where dozens of people lost their life and millions of people had experienced life with no power for days and days and days, no heat. So, you know, things like that. That was our main concern when we were thinking about relocating. So that's that. Question number 3. What's been your experience as a person of color, I like to say I'm a black person, not a person of color, I'm a black person. What's your experience been as a black person in Vancouver? Because I think it would be helpful if we gave some context, right? Because I think everybody's lives are different, and like paint a thumbnail of what your lifestyle is like, our lifestyle is like.
Okay, so our lifestyle is even prior to me getting into real estate, we work from home. We still run an e-commerce business together. Jared's been a long-time investor. I've worked with him for the past 7 years on the investing side of real estate. So we work from home. We like to get out and do social things.
Right. And again, obviously, at the time of filming this, we're now almost a year into a global and a domestic shutdown, right? So I think everyone's normal lifestyle has been affected, but yeah, normally.
So pre-COVID, we would go out once or twice a week and meet up with a running group here locally. And that was our first source of friends. Jared rides motorcycles, and we met a lot of friends through your motorcycle. It's not a club.
It's calling it a motorcycle gang. Go with gang. We're a gang.
Okay, your motorcycle gang. Gang seems too far, and club seems like juvenile. Group.
Whatever.
Okay. So that was running was the source of our friends. Motorcycles. How else do we need?
So I mean, I guess in a nutshell, we're not super outgoing, going out partying, stuff like that. We've gotten pulled into that through our different networks and friends we've met here.
Neighbors.
But yeah, we normally are always together, and that's it. We're kind of homebodies, and if nothing else, it's funny. This as crazy and as sad as this pandemic has been, and we really mourn the loss of all 500,000 Americans who've lost their lives in the last year. It hasn't been as big a change of lifestyle for us because we were used to being home and together anyway.
Yeah.
So that, just a little bit of context, maybe that helps you. Maybe
we do go out and run, like in our neighborhoods, and which is, I guess, kind of why we brought up Ahmaud Arbery in the beginning.
Yeah,
because
right.
I don't know, when we're running, I am concerned.
Right.
Maybe not the exact experience he had, but there was that story in Oregon of a black man who was run over in Troutdale, Gresham.
Right. And historically, and we can probably get into this.
Purposely run over.
Yeah. Maybe this is a good video for it, maybe it isn't, but they're, historically, as in like the forming of the states.
Well, Oregon had a whites only law on their books in their constitution.
Right. Up until relatively recently. So
egregiously recently.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of sundown towns.
And what is a sundown town for those people?
Oh, wow. A sundown town is where if you're black, you needed to be in your house or out of the city limits by sundown, or they would pursue you, chase you, beat you up, harm you. And that's just historical fact. So if you watch the show Lovecraft Country, which is on HBO, they reference the idea of a sundown town, which is not fiction. Okay, so that kind of gives you a background on our lifestyle. Which is an interesting question, I guess, because if you're talking about, I mean, obviously we live in Vancouver, but we go into Portland, we go out to the gorge, we go out to the coast, we've gone north. So there's, you know, living in one city is one thing, but obviously through the nature of life, and if you like to go out and do things, you're not going to stay within your city limits 100% of the time. So the two racial experiences that I had living in the Pacific Northwest happened outside of Vancouver and outside of Clark County. The first one was we were driving out to the gorge on Highway 14, and when we entered Skamania County, the police,
I think it was the sheriff.
Yeah, so law enforcement got behind us and started following us very aggressively in a way that was extremely uncomfortable, and followed us from almost the start of the county line until we left the county and entered, that would be Klickitat County. At the county line, they turned around. So some people might say, well, that's not a racial experience. Some people who are people of color would definitely understand why that's a racial experience. So that was one, and then the other happened in Portland when we were in between appointments and we stopped outside the woman's house.
That's right.
Last summer, and
we're just pulled over on a public street. We're kind of killing time between appointments. So, you know, fairly
public road,
populated public road.
And but outside of her house, on the street, on the public street, and she was looking out her window, and her dogs were barking, and she opened the door and was kind of like looking in on us, and you know, we noticed it but didn't think much of it, and she ended up, I think our windows were cracked because it was the summer and the car was off, and she ended up yelling.
Like, what are you doing here? Don't you know what's been going on in the community? There's been a lot of break-ins. Like, why are you here? You're making my dog bark. I'm calling the police.
And then, you know, we saw her on the phone. She came outside a couple more times, and, you know, we tried to ignore her, but she did end up getting on the phone, and we decided that we could interact with the police because she's calling the police, they're probably going to show up, or we could just leave. And we decided to leave and not see that experience through. But I don't think that we would have had the same experience if we were of a different race. And again, maybe you disagree with that, but that's an experience that we experienced, that felt racial, and to a lot of people would. But neither of those happened in Vancouver.
And honestly, it's funny, I had almost forgotten them until you just reminded me. I did forget them, honestly, because in the big scheme of my journey, they don't even barely register. So again, it just goes into perspective, right?
Right.
To you, it was a bigger deal. What I'm trying to say is those fairly minor incidents, even though I do remember being tailed by the sheriff now, definitely get your heart racing. But I mean, that's happened to me every stop of the way. You know, so again, as Black people, this is stuff, unfortunately, that we have to deal with, and we're fighting to change it, because again, we're not criminals. We're born in this stolen land just like anybody else is, right? So that didn't even really register to me, but it's something, like I said, I really wouldn't put on Southwest Washington, Vancouver, or even Portland.
No. What do you notice is different about Southwest Washington? You lead this time.
Good question. Not a lot, and then some things. So again, in my experience, most of the country is very similar when it comes to being a Black person. So overall, again, my experience here has been very pleasant. The downside is we live in, you know, compared to Philadelphia or Atlanta or Los Angeles, we live in a super, super small community. We're in a small town compared to where I've come from. Less than 180,000 people. The part that troubles me is that in the small town, there are incidents of Black men, Black women, Black people being shot by police. You know, up until now, there are no body cams required to be worn on law enforcement, which is something that is absolutely outrageous. It's unacceptable. You know, our city council, county council has been dragging their feet on this issue. It's actually something that's made Hallie and I kind of start our activism journey, because in 2021, I said recently, you know, this is a day and age, we have cameras on everything from your dashboard to your doorbell. So
to your babysitter.
So absolutely no reason law enforcement shouldn't be equipped with this device. So, we have had now in 3 months, 2 different black men that were murdered at the hands of the police, Clark County Sheriff in both cases. And then the disturbing part, and again, this isn't necessarily relative to here, although other cities are starting to get it right. But the part that bothers me is that in most of these cases where there is police killing, other police departments, normally adjacent or neighboring police departments, are called in to investigate. Mm-hmm. So that doesn't make any kind of sense to me. It's really not acceptable, and that's something that needs to change. But that's been my overall experience. It's been fairly positive, even being a minority here versus other places like you said.
We haven't had any law enforcement encounters living in Clark County in our 3 years. I would also say culturally in the black community in Vancouver and Southwest Washington, and I guess just the greater Portland area, there's less acknowledgement. So when you're black and you're out traveling, doesn't matter really where you go, a nod or wave or acknowledgement is very common among black people. Mm-hmm. And that's a little less common here. Sometimes people look at you like you're a little funny if you wave to them or, nod your head. So that's something that's a little different. And we've talked to people who've moved from other places here and they've said the same thing.
I guess sometimes fellow black people will look at you like a little bit arm's length. But the people who we have done that with, who are receptive, we actually have some really great friendships because of that. So
some of them are my clients right now.
Some of them are your clients right now. Over this past year, 2020, Hallie and I went to a lot of rallies and memorials and peaceful protests. And for some odd reason, these folks wanted to come out and counter-protest or protest against police brutality or racism. You will see that. That's something I've never seen anywhere else.
So next question is, what challenges and opportunities present themselves being black in the Pacific Northwest? So I would say, in terms of from a business perspective, you can become a certified minority-owned business, which can open you up to different contracts with the state, with different government agencies. So that's going to be an opportunity. Yeah,
that's a really exciting part for me, being in business and loving to network with other business-minded black people. And if you are black and business-minded, you can do really well here. In fact, as of the recording of this video, this is Black Restaurant Week in Portland. So my wife, who's a big-time foodie, this is like her week. So we're looking forward to supporting a bunch of different black-owned businesses and restaurants. So you can do really well with that.
What kind of cultural events are available in Southwest Washington, specifically related to black culture? There is a Juneteenth celebration that the NAACP puts on. There's also a Black History Month art exhibit that happens at the Fort Vancouver Regional Libraries. And then one of our friends and contributor to this video, who runs the Noble Foundation, has a community picnic that goes on as well annually. Again, COVID no object. And then there's some other events that people are planning, like a 3-on-3 basketball tournament, a black ball, which would happen in the fall time, like October, November. So there's...
Like a dress-up ball? Formal?
Yeah, like a formal ball.
I'll do that.
So there's, even though, again, going back to what Jared said, comparatively to the national average, we represent a smaller portion of the community. I would say that the heart, the spirit, the involvement of the black community here in Vancouver and Southwest Washington is growing, is being strengthened, is a really beautiful thing to see the growth of it, the way that we have been welcomed in by all groups, and specifically by the black community here, and made more of an effort to seek out community. And
that was also an effort to get more involved, to serve
on a local level, on a civic level,
to lead maybe. So yeah, that's a good point.
To volunteer and do different things. To just be more involved in our community. So while we say that we've had a largely positive experience, and I would say overwhelmingly positive experience from a racial standpoint living in Vancouver, Southwest Washington, the Pacific Northwest, I realize that may not be the case for everyone. And the same way that, a white person can have a positive and negative experience, or any person of any color can have a positive or negative experience in an area, not related to race. But I think when you are a person of color, there are different experiences that you have related to being a person of color.
just overall, like if we're connecting with you on this episode and you're a Black person and you're wondering is Vancouver or Southwest Washington or Portland right for me, hopefully we can help you with that. So overall, I would say absolutely. One of the things I think people are slowly starting to realize is that as Black people, we're not monoliths. For us, I love the outdoors. I love rain. I love snow. I love greenery. I love hikes. I love windy roads that I could ride my motorcycle on. But chances are, whatever you're into, you can find it here. So again, whether you love outdoor life, whether you love kind of like a slower paced lifestyle, very unpretentious, right? Like every time we get someone who comes and visits us, they normally bring a bunch of suitcases, and I'm like, honestly, you ain't going to use none of that stuff. Like you can do very well here with the basic, we call it almost like your P&W uniform, right? Like a plaid shirt, comfortable, Be
yourself.
Be
In whatever version or iteration that is, because as unpretentious and dressy as it can be, if you wanted to be dressed up or you want to deliver faster pace of life, you can go find a faster pace of life here too.
So you find a lot of what you're looking for, a lot of things that, our big thing in our business and in our household is our mantra is freedom, fulfillment, and happiness. And you can find that in spades here. Just a lot of, just a lot of intangibles that, really can make you feel much more whole as a person. You'll find here. And so as a community, Black people, we're growing, we're vibrant, we're starting to connect in new and deeper ways. It's really exciting for me, honestly. If you are considering Southwest Washington, Vancouver, Portland even,
as a person of color,
as a Black person of color, absolutely. I feel like this is like the best kept secret. And again, I have a little bit of experience living in different parts of the country.
That is true.
Yep.
So with that being said, if you know anyone who's looking to move within or to Vancouver and Southwest Washington, make sure to give me a call, text, email. Jared even says snail mail. Then reach out. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. If you're gonna come visit, let me know. We can check out some different areas. I can recommend the best restaurants in the area and any hikes or excursions you want to do. Whether we're dealing with COVID or not, there's still a lot of things that you can get out and do here and enjoy yourself.
Yep. And if you want to connect also, if you are considering moving on Facebook, can I tell them about the group? So look up Vancouver Talk. It is parentheses Washington, but it's a great group. It's a ton of resources. It's fun stuff, water cooler,
It's just a local community Facebook group where we talk about events that go on. We ask for recommendations. Actually, my wedding ring, which is Jared's grandmother's ring, it's an heirloom ring, was bent the other day. Unfortunately, I'm really sad about it. And so I asked for a jewelry repair recommendation in Vancouver Talk, and I got a lot of good feedback. So it's a community resource. It's a place to connect, to have fun. We post jokes in there. We
Merchant Monday. So if you have a business, you can promote your business on Monday and get a lot of business and referrals that way.
Yeah, so I'll link it in the description if you want to join, as you're considering Vancouver and want to see what the community that we're always referencing is like. You can actually interact with us and with other people in the community.
Yeah, and just to put a bow on this whole video, and I don't know how much you'll edit it and condense it, but overall what I would say is that, would I like Vancouver? Would I find home in Vancouver? Speaking just for Hallie and I, we always agree on the fact that we know what we know now, being here for 3 years, we will always maintain a home in this Vancouver area. And I think that says a lot, right?
And when we first moved here, do you remember we used to ask each other like every other week, and then it became every other month. It was like, is there anything that you don't like about it yet? And we would think about it and be like, no, we really love it here. And we hope you would too. And if you become part of the community, then that's what we would hope for you. Maybe it's for you, maybe it's not, but I'm here to help you either way.
So thanks for checking us out, watching this video, and hopefully getting a little different perspective, maybe something that you don't see a lot of videos on regarding the Pacific Northwest. Kind
of a touchy subject and a risky subject to talk about when it comes to from a business perspective, but it does matter. And it, to people who are watching, maybe, if you're white, you don't relate to it, but maybe you are appreciative to see another perspective, whether you live here or considering moving here. Maybe it's a relief to you that it's in some ways, and if you're a person of color, we want it to be this resource for people, it wouldn't be fair to not talk about this issue, because it will affect people who are moving here. And if I don't do it, who else is going to? So it was one of those things where it's like, it's a little uncomfortable to talk about, it's a little scary to put it out there for the public and for everyone to see, but at the same time, no one else is talking about it, and so if I don't, who will?
Absolutely.
So with that being said, hope you join us for another episode of Home with Hal, and make sure to like, subscribe, share. It really supports the channel and brings a smile to my face every time I see a new one. So I'm looking for you to do it, okay?
You'll make her day.
Signing out. Ciao.
Ciao.